Welcome to our channel. We're so excited to have you here with us today. In this story, you'll dive into a world of tradition, law, and unexpected twists, things that make our tales truly unforgettable. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Whether you're tuning in from across the world or just down the street, your voice matters. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss our next special story coming tomorrow. Get ready for more thrilling adventures, and thanks for being part of our journey. This Royal Guard's pendant sparked a legal revolution. Here's why. It was a crisp early morning at Buckingham Palace, one of the most iconic landmarks in London. The sun had barely risen, casting a golden hue over the ornate gates of the palace as the changing of the guard ceremony commenced. Tourists from all over the world gathered, eagerly waiting to witness this royal spectacle that had become a timeless tradition. Amid the crowd, standing just a few feet away from the imposing gates, was Judge Samuel Parker. At 57, Parker was a seasoned jurist known for his progressive rulings and sharp legal mind. His reputation preceded him, and his unyielding pursuit of justice had earned him respect in the courtroom and beyond. But on that morning, surrounded by the rich history of Buckingham Palace, it wasn't a case or a legal matter that captured his attention. Instead, it was something as simple as a small silver pendant worn by one of the royal guards. Captain Daniel Hunter, a tall and imposing figure, stood stoically among the other guards in his brilliant red uniform and towering black bearskin cap. But what caught Parker's keen eye wasn't the crispness of the uniform or the precision of the drill. It was the pendant. Small, unassuming, but unmistakable. It hung around Hunter's neck, gleaming softly in the early morning light. To the casual observer, it was a minor detail, hardly worth noticing. But to Parker, it was something far more troubling. The pendant was a family heirloom, a silver medallion that featured an image of Hunter's grandfather, a soldier who had made the ultimate sacrifice during World War II. This token of remembrance, worn proudly by the young captain, was a symbol of family, legacy, and sacrifice. Yet to Parker it was something else entirely. It was a violation, a breach of military protocol. Parker's sharp eyes scanned the scene, and a sense of unease settled over him. As a man of the law, he had always valued tradition, structure, and order, and in his mind, the presence of such a personal item in the rigid formality of the Royal Guard ceremony was nothing short of a disruption. To him, the guards were symbols of the monarchy's authority, their discipline unwavering, their focus absolute. Any deviation from this was an affront to the very institution they served. His thoughts raced, pulling him back to his own childhood, a time when faith, family, and tradition were as intertwined as the very laws he now upheld. He had grown up in a devout Christian household, where every action was guided by Scripture and the belief that divine intervention could change the course of destiny. But that belief had been shattered when his mother had passed away from cancer, despite years of fervent prayers. The helplessness he had felt in those final moments had left him with a deep resentment towards religion. As he stood there, watching the Royal Guard carry out their duties with unparalleled precision, Parker felt a surge of indignation. He couldn't shake the image of the pendant hanging from Hunter's neck. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a statement, one that clashed with the rigid discipline Parker revered so much. His mind, trained over decades of legal battles, was unable to reconcile the two. The symbol of faith, the family legacy, and the military tradition seemed to be at odds in a way that unsettled him deeply. "This can't be regulation," he muttered under his breath, his words barely audible over the sounds of the ceremony. His gaze never left Hunter, whose face remained impassive, the very embodiment of military duty. The young captain's silence only fueled Parker's frustration. With a swift motion, Parker straightened his tie, a gesture he had made countless times in courtrooms across the country before making a ruling. His resolve hardened, and he knew what he had to do. He would confront Hunter. He would demand the removal of the pendant, and if Hunter refused, he would take it further. This was not just about military protocol. To Parker, it was a matter of principle. He approached Captain Hunter, his footsteps sharp and deliberate on the cobblestones, his eyes locked on the pendant that had disturbed his sense of order. But what Parker couldn't have known was that this small act of defiance would lead to an unexpected battle, one that would uncover more than he ever anticipated, revealing the deep personal wounds he had long buried. What began as a simple enforcement of tradition would soon unravel in ways Parker could never have predicted. As Parker approached Captain Hunter, his thoughts raced, his anger building with every step. He had spent his career upholding the law with unwavering dedication, often making difficult decisions without hesitation. Yet, in this moment, his emotions clouded his judgment. His resentment toward the cross symbol he had seen throughout his life, the symbol of a faith that had failed his mother, now seemed to crystallize in the pendant that hung from Hunter's neck. The quiet rebellion it represented ignited something deep inside him. "Captain Hunter," Parker called, his voice sharp, commanding the attention of the guard. Hunter, standing rigid and motionless, turned his head slightly, acknowledging the judge's presence without breaking his stance. His gaze remained forward, as was customary for a royal guard, unflinching, stoic, and unwavering. "You are in violation of military tradition," Parker said, his voice laced with authority. "That pendant, remove it." The words were out before he could fully grasp their weight. It wasn't just about the rules. It wasn't just about a piece of jewelry that Parker considered out of place. It was personal. He saw in that pendant a challenge to his beliefs, a symbol of everything he had rejected after losing his mother to cancer, a loss that shattered the faith he had once clung to. Hunter's face remained unreadable, his posture unyielding, the silent defiance emanating from him almost palpable. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade, leaving only Parker, whose chest rose and fell with each breath, his frustration mounting. "Do you hear me, Captain?" Parker demanded, his voice a little louder, more insistent. "Remove it. Now." Still, no reply came from Hunter. His eyes remained fixed forward, his mind seemingly miles away, deep in the heart of the ceremonial duty he had sworn to uphold. To Hunter, the rules of tradition and duty were sacred, and his family's legacy, the very pendant that Parker now wished to strip from him, was just as sacred. The tension in the air was thick, the silence stretching between them. Parker's fingers twitched, itching to take further action. His thoughts drifted to his years in the courtroom. How many times had he faced stubborn defendants, unwavering in their stance? He had never backed down then, and he wouldn't back down now. This was a battle of principle, of power, and of the belief that no one, no matter who they were, could break the rules without consequence. Finally, with an exhale of frustration, Parker stepped closer. "If you refuse to comply, I'll have no choice but to issue a summons. You'll stand trial for this violation. Understand that." Still, there was nothing but silence. It was as if Hunter hadn't heard him, or worse, as if he didn't care. The judge's heart pounded, his mind racing. What was it about that pendant, that symbol of faith, that riled him so? Was it really about the rules of military discipline? Or was it about his personal disdain for the very symbol Hunter wore? Without another word, Parker's hand reached into his pocket. He pulled out a business card, a formal summons that would carry the full weight of his authority. Scribbling quickly, he wrote, "The charges," feeling the sharp pressure of the pen against the paper. This wasn't just a minor infraction. This was a defiance that could not be tolerated. He tucked the card into Hunter's tunic, his fingers brushing against the fabric with an unexpected sense of finality. Hunter didn't flinch. He didn't move. Parker stood there for a moment, watching the guard still form. His emotions churned, the words from his earlier outburst lingering in the air between them. But as he turned to walk away, his mind was already racing ahead. To what would come next? The courtroom awaited. This wasn't over, it had just begun. The quiet hum of the crowd around them resumed as if nothing had happened. But in Parker's mind, the wheels of fate were already turning. He had set this in motion. And now there would be consequences. Consequences that would shake not just the traditions of the royal guard, but the very foundation of his own beliefs. The days that followed were filled with a palpable tension. Parker's decision to confront Captain Hunter had been swift, but the consequences of his actions were far from over. As the news of the incident at Buckingham Palace spread, the whispers began. Among the palace staff, the tourists, and even the soldiers themselves, the story of the judge's demand for the removal of the pendant became a topic of heated conversation. Many felt it was a minor infraction, a small act of rebellion against tradition. But for Parker, it was a matter of principle, a line that in his mind had been crossed. Parker couldn't shake the feeling that he had been right to issue the summons. It was about more than a small symbol on a uniform. It was about tradition, duty, and the respect for the order that had served the British monarchy for centuries. And yet, as the days passed, doubts began to creep into his mind. What if he had been too quick to judge? What if his personal animosity toward religion, toward symbols like the cross, had clouded his decision? What if he had misinterpreted Hunter's actions altogether? The day of the trial arrived with a cold, gray sky hanging over Westminster Magistrates' Court. The once bustling streets of London now felt eerily quiet as the courthouse doors swung open. Spectators gathered in anticipation, their voices hushed as they awaited the arrival of Captain Hunter, the man who had defied the authority of a seasoned judge. News outlets had already picked up the story, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, lawyers, and curious onlookers. Parker entered the courtroom with his usual air of authority. His robes billowed as he took his place at the bench, his eyes scanning the room with a calm but intense gaze. He had come here to do his duty, to bring justice to a case that had shaken the traditions he held dear. But as he looked around the room, the weight of the situation settled in. This was no ordinary case. It wasn't just about the pendant anymore. It was about something much larger, about authority, respect, and personal beliefs. As Parker prepared to call the court to order, the door to the courtroom opened, and in stepped Captain Daniel Hunter. He walked in slowly, his red tunic standing, out against the sea of dark suits and robes. The air in the room seemed to shift as everyone turned to look at him. But what stunned the crowd was not just Hunter's appearance. It was the fact that he had come to the courtroom alone. No lawyer by his side, no legal counsel. Just him, standing tall and proud, the pendant still hanging from his neck. The room fell silent. "You're representing yourself?" the clerk asked, incredulous. Hunter nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yes, ma'am." A murmur rippled through the gallery as the gravity of the situation set in. This wasn't a simple violation of military protocol. This was turning into something far bigger, an unlikely showdown between a judge and a soldier, each representing different values, different traditions. Parker's gaze never wavered as he watched Hunter take his place. He had expected this to be a simple affair, an opportunity to teach the young guard a lesson in discipline. But now, as Hunter stood before him, the weight of the moment hit him like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a courtroom. It was a battleground for ideas. As the trial began, Parker outlined the charges: violation of military uniform codes, disrespect for tradition, and improper religious display. His voice was steady, authoritative, but underneath it there was a flicker of doubt that he couldn't quite shake. Hunter remained silent, his posture perfect, his eyes fixed forward. Then came the moment that Parker had not anticipated. Hunter stepped forward, his gaze unwavering as he addressed the court. "I am not just a guard," he said, his voice steady but filled with a quiet strength. "I am Captain Daniel Hunter. I hold a degree in law from Cambridge University. I served the Judge Advocate General's Corps, and I have the right to represent myself here today." The words hit Parker like a cold wave. The man he had dismissed as merely a soldier was, in fact, a qualified barrister, a seasoned legal mind, capable of dismantling Parker's arguments with precision. The shock rippled through the room, and, for the first time, Parker felt a flicker of uncertainty. Hunter's defense was methodical, calculated, and precise. He presented evidence that the pendant, his family heirloom, a symbol of his grandfather's sacrifice, had been approved by the Ministry of Defense. The military regulations allowed for small, non-disruptive religious symbols to be worn, provided they didn't interfere with duty. His argument was solid, backed by paperwork and military precedent. With every point Hunter made, Parker's confidence waned. What had started as a simple matter of military discipline now seemed to be unraveling in front of him. He had expected to teach Hunter a lesson, but instead, he found himself facing a masterclass in law. As Hunter laid out the evidence, Parker's hand froze mid-air, his fingers gripping the edge of the bench. He had underestimated the man before him. This wasn't about the rules. It was about something deeper, about respect for tradition, for family, and for the personal convictions that shaped the man standing before him. The trial was no longer just about a uniform violation. It was about a clash of worlds, of duty and personal beliefs, of authority and the right to stand up for one's principles. And as the courtroom watched in silence, Parker realized that he was no longer in control. The outcome of this case, and perhaps his own understanding of tradition, was now in the hands of Captain Daniel Hunter. The courtroom was tense, almost electric with anticipation, as Captain Daniel Hunter stood before Judge Samuel Parker. The seasoned judge's mind raced as he grappled with the weight of the situation. His years of experience in the courtroom had always given him an unshakable confidence, but today, facing a royal guard who was also a trained barrister, Parker felt his authority slipping. Hunter's legal precision was undeniable, and with every document and precedent Hunter presented, Parker's certainty crumbled just a little more. Hunter wasn't just defending a piece of jewelry. He wasn't merely battling for the right to wear his grandfather's silver pendant. He was dismantling Parker's entire case. One document after another, Hunter carefully disassembled Parker's accusations, presenting evidence that the pendant had been approved under military regulations. His calm, measured tone was a stark contrast to Parker's mounting frustration. Parker's earlier thoughts of a simple reprimand, a quick victory for the law, had faded into the background as Hunter's defense unfolded. Parker's eyes flicked back and forth between the documents laid out on the table before him, the military codes, the regulations, and the historical precedents Hunter cited. Each one bolstered Hunter's argument and chipped away at the judge's position. Parker had thought this would be an open and shut case, a simple violation of tradition, a guard who refused to follow protocol. But as the evidence piled up, it became clear this wasn't about tradition at all. It was about something much deeper. Parker's grip on his gavel tightened as he tried to suppress the unease swirling inside him. This wasn't the outcome he had expected, and yet he couldn't help but feel respect for the way Hunter was handling himself. Just when Parker thought he couldn't be any more surprised, Hunter dropped a bombshell. The pendant was not just a family heirloom. It was a part of his grandfather's legacy, his sacrifice at Normandy. Hunter explained how the pendant had been passed down through generations of soldiers, a silent tribute to those who had fought and died for their country. The weight of those words hung in the air, casting a long shadow over the courtroom. Parker was stunned into silence. This wasn't just a soldier's pride. It was the very foundation of who Hunter was, a part of him as much as his uniform, his service, his commitment to his duty. Hunter's words were quiet, but they carried a heavy significance. This pendant isn't just mine, it's my family's, it's my grandfather's, and it represents everything he stood for. It's not just about religious symbolism. It's about honoring the past while serving the present. The room fell silent as Parker took in Hunter's words. For the first time, he saw the situation from a different perspective. The pendant wasn't a violation of tradition. It was an emblem of respect, an embodiment of the very sacrifices that had shaped the military traditions Parker held so dear. Parker opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. He had always prided himself on his ability to make the right call, to ensure that justice prevailed. But now, as Hunter's defense continued to unfold, Parker realized that his initial decision had been made in haste, driven by his own biases. The clarity he had once felt seemed so distant now. How could he have been so sure? How could he have judged so quickly? As the defense continued, Hunter's arguments became more than just legal. They became a moral challenge. Parker's unwavering belief in tradition, in law, in the need to preserve order, had collided with Hunter's quiet, steadfast insistence on the right to honor his family's history. Each word Hunter spoke was a challenge to the rigid structures Parker had spent his life defending. But it was more than that. It was an invitation for Parker to question his own assumptions, to confront the biases he had unknowingly carried with him for so many years. The courtroom was filled with a quiet, simmering tension as Colonel Michael Anderson, Hunter's commanding officer, took the stand. His testimony only strengthened Hunter's case, confirming that the pendant had been approved by military regulations and had been thoroughly reviewed by the proper authorities. The colonel's words were authoritative, and his presence in the courtroom gave weight to Hunter's argument. He wasn't just a lone soldier fighting for his right to wear the pendant. He had the full backing of the military hierarchy behind him. As Parker listened, he felt his world shift beneath him. The ground he had stood on for so long was no longer solid. The laws he had followed, the traditions he had championed, all seemed to waver in the face of Hunter's quiet strength. And with each word, each piece of evidence, Parker's position weakened further. Finally, as Hunter's defense concluded, Parker's voice broke the silence. "This court has made some serious oversights," he began, his words heavy with reluctance. "It seems that in my haste to uphold tradition, I have neglected the very principles of justice I swore to protect." The room was still, the air thick with the weight of his admission. Parker had never been one to back down, but in that moment, he realized that true justice wasn't just about enforcing the law. It was about understanding, about seeing beyond the surface to the deeper truths that lay beneath. With a reluctant sigh, Parker reached for his gavel. "The charges are dismissed," he declared, his voice soft but firm. "Captain Hunter's actions were in full compliance with military regulations. This court owes him an apology." And in that moment, the courtroom exhaled, the tension lifting as Parker's decision settled over them like a shroud. Hunter's quiet victory was not just a legal win, it was a triumph of understanding, of looking beyond appearances and embracing the complexities of the human story. As Parker's gavel fell, the judge's voice was no longer one of unwavering authority. It was one of humility, recognizing the flaws in his own judgment. As the courtroom grew still, the weight of Parker's words hung in the air, a moment of rare humility from a man who had spent his life making decisions for others. The charge had been dismissed, the court had acknowledged its mistakes, and yet something lingered. The atmosphere in the room shifted, not just because of the legal victory, but because of the unexpected turn of events that had unfolded. Captain Daniel Hunter had not only defended his right to wear his grandfather's pendant, but he had also dismantled the very foundation of Parker's judgment. It was a victory that transcended the law. It was a personal triumph. But just as Parker was about to dismiss the court, Hunter's calm voice cut through the silence, drawing everyone's attention back to him. "One final statement for the record, Your Honor," Hunter said, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of a man who had been through much more than any legal argument could reveal. Parker hesitated for a moment. He had already admitted his error, had already made the decision to dismiss the charges, but something in Hunter's tone made him pause. He nodded, acknowledging the request. Hunter stepped forward, his posture as disciplined as ever. Yet there was a depth in his eyes that spoke of something more than military service. His words were measured, deliberate, each one carrying the weight of his family's legacy, his faith, and his resolve. "I'm grateful for the court's decision," Hunter began, his voice calm but with an undercurrent of emotion. "But I think it's important that we all recognize something beyond the law. This pendant, the one that has caused so much tension in this courtroom, is more than just an object. It's a symbol of my grandfather's sacrifice, of my family's history. It represents everything that is good about tradition: respect, duty, honor. Parker's heart tightened as he listened. He had thought of the pendant only as a symbol of defiance, something that had violated military discipline. But now, with Hunter's words, he realized it was far more than that. It was a connection to the past, a bridge between generations, that had fought to preserve the very traditions Parker had once held sacred. Hunter's voice softened, and he continued, "I understand that symbols can stir emotions, especially in a place like this. But what I want everyone to understand is that tradition isn't about rigidly enforcing rules without regard for context or meaning. Tradition is about honoring the past while adapting to the present, about respecting the sacrifices of those who came before us without allowing those sacrifices to define us in ways that no longer fit the world we live in." The words hit Parker like a wave crashing against the shore, breaking through the walls he had built around his beliefs. He had spent his entire life upholding tradition, seeing it as something inviolable, something that demanded respect. But now, in the face of Hunter's quiet strength, he wondered if he had misunderstood what tradition truly meant. "I wear this pendant not just because it's a family heirloom," Hunter continued, his voice unwavering, "but because it connects me to my grandfather's legacy. It reminds me every day of why I chose this path, to serve my country with honor, just as he did." The room was silent, and for the first time Parker felt the full weight of the situation. His own beliefs, his own biases, had led him down a path of judgment and condemnation. But in that moment, listening to Hunter speak, he realized the true lesson of this trial. It wasn't about the law, it wasn't about the pendant. It was about understanding, about acknowledging the complexities of the human experience, and about the courage it took to stand up for what was right, even when faced with overwhelming odds. Hunter's final words were simple, but powerful. In a world that often feels divided, we must find ways to respect both the past and the present. We must learn to honor both tradition and individuality. Parker stood there, silent, processing what Hunter had said. For so long he had viewed the law as black and white, right and wrong, tradition and violation. But now, standing in front of the man who had challenged his worldview, he saw that the world was not so simple. There was nuance, there was context, and there was room for both tradition and change. As Parker's gavel fell, the sound echoed through the courtroom, marking the official end of the trial. But in that moment, it felt like more than just a legal decision. It felt like a personal reckoning. Parker's voice, when it finally came, was quieter than usual, tinged with the humility he had rarely shown in his long career. "This court has made some serious errors," he began, his tone softer than before. "And I must admit, the decision I made initially was flawed. Captain Hunter, I apologize for the assumptions I made. Your actions, your dedication to your family's legacy, and your service to this country are beyond reproach." For the first time in this entire ordeal, Parker saw Hunter's expression soften. The quiet pride that had been present throughout the trial remained. But there was something else in his eyes now. Recognition, perhaps, of the moment that had just passed. The gavel fell one final time, and the courtroom released a collective breath. As Parker stood up ready to leave the courtroom, Hunter turned to him. "Thank you, Judge," he said quietly. "I appreciate your understanding." Parker nodded, his mind still processing the lessons of the past few days. He had come into this trial thinking he knew the truth, thinking he had the answers. But now, as he left the courtroom, he realized that true justice wasn't about rigidly enforcing rules. It was about seeing the humanity behind the symbols, the laws, and the traditions. We hope you enjoyed today's story as much as we did telling. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes we must look beyond our immediate judgments and try to understand the full picture before making decisions. Captain Hunter's defense not only challenged the law, but also gave us a deeper understanding of what tradition truly means. It's about respecting the past, embracing the present, and finding balance in both. Now, we want to hear from you. What did you think of today's trial? Do you believe tradition should always be upheld, no matter the cost? Or do you think there's room for change and individuality within established systems? Have you ever faced a situation where your personal beliefs clashed with a long-standing tradition or rule? How did you handle it? Leave us a comment below with your thoughts. We'd love to know where you're watching from too, whether you're near Buckingham Palace, across the globe, or somewhere else entirely. Your perspective adds so much to our community, and we truly appreciate each of you for sharing it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next episode. We've got more thrilling and thought-provoking stories coming your way tomorrow.